This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Branding Isolate.
Hey, my fellow people of the plant, Kevin here, and I want to share my recent experience hiring Elena and the Branding Isolate team to help me update Cannabinoid Connect's logo. They made the process super easy and efficient by first meeting with me to learn about the origin story of the Cannabinoid Connect brand, then using that information to inform the updated logo's design. The branding agency is comprised of professional designers and developers who have over 2 decades of experience in design, branding, and web development services. Whether you're a new CBD business looking for branding or a new website, or if you're an existing business that's just looking to update your current branding, I recommend you call the team at Branding Isolate. Their number is 832-379-8978, or you can visit their website at brandingisolate.com. Branding Isolate, the branding agency that handcrafts brands that sell, connect, and succeed. Hello, my fellow people of the plant. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Cannabinoid Connect podcast, your favorite podcast that includes industry-facing conversations with the industry's leading experts that aim to educate and inform the public regarding the plant's endless benefits. My guest today is Dr. Jon Vaught. He's the co-founder and CEO at Front Range Biosciences. Dr. Jon Vaught, welcome back to the program, man. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm good. Really excited to be talking to you today because I know that Front Range Biosciences came out with a very exciting announcement recently regarding their new cannabinoid variety line, which includes THCV, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Got a whole class of new genetics and products.
Nice. Well, that's always been like the anomaly kind of cannabinoid in my eyes because I was recently as a guest on a podcast. It's the Higher Ed Hemp Tours podcast, and THCV got brought up, and it was kind of hush hush. I kind of wanted to ask more. We didn't really get too into it, but I'm excited to talk to you today about it. And so let's first start with the science, behind, say, just cannabinoids in general, right? I know that there's some type of synthesizing process that occurs when it comes to the cannabinoid acids that make the actual cannabinoid compounds. So why don't you talk us through the science, and then we'll kind of get into specifically THCV and what that is.
Yeah, well, as a lot of people know and talk about, the cannabis plant produces a lot of really unique molecules. Cannabinoids are one class of them. There's also compounds like terpenes, as well as other groups like flavonoids. All in all, the plant produces well over 500 unique small molecules, probably more. In terms of cannabinoids, there's, I think, at least 130 or 140 so that have been identified and characterized to some extent. So again, there really are a lot of different cannabinoids. THCV is a really exciting, cannabinoid. It's been a bit elusive for growers for quite a long time. It's kind of an interesting mutation that leads to THCV production, and so I think it's been hard and what you see actually is in the plant varieties that do produce THCV, they're generally low yielding, and so being able to produce high amounts of THCV but still have a vigorous, high yielding plant has really been a challenge, I think, for cannabis breeders and growers. And I think what we've been able to do is really solve that problem. There's lots of other cannabinoids. There's also varin versions or propylcannabinoid versions, so the V at the end of THCV. There are other versions of those cannabinoids as well. So there's a CBDV. There can even be things like a CBCV or a CBGV. So, there's really a number of different modifications that occur like this within the plant.
Mm-hmm. And just to clarify for the audience and whatnot, because we have talked a lot about Delta 8 recently, and they're not at all similar, but the one thing that is similar in that, like, a hemp plant has 0.3 or less THC, right? Which to get Delta 8, there's not enough THC in the plant to extract it, which is why they have to do that conversion with CBD to turn it into Delta 8 or Delta 9, or, that conversion process. But what you're saying is cannabis plants naturally have THCV in them, not all of them, but some strains. and there's not enough of that particular cannabinoid compound in it to extract. So what y'all have done has actually genetically modified a strain, or how have you done this?
No, we just leverage next generation breeding technologies, combination of selective breeding, but we have the advantage of leveraging DNA markers. We have a number of different assays where we look at certain markers in the plant. We also have a in-house analytical chemistry team, so we have specific compounds that we track in terms of monitoring cannabinoids and terpenes, and we use all of that data to speed up our breeding program, so we can screen hundreds or even thousands of unique lines or seeds that come from a breeding event, and then very quickly find the ones that we're looking for. And that's really at the end of the day how we do it. And then as I mentioned, what we've learned about THCV and the propyl cannabinoid synthesis pathway, in the plant from a genetics or a genomics and a bioinformatics perspective, that's giving us some insight about what to look for in terms of, how to produce a high yielding plant and produce THCV, right? Or a vigorous plant. So it's just, without getting into too much detail, but, it's a little bit of a glimpse of some of the things that we've done. And so, right now, as we mentioned in the press release, we're, rolling out with some partners in California, different THCV lines. The first one is Day Slayer, that'll be available in California. I think there'll be others coming, afterwards. Because again, now that we understand what to look for, we have the ability to create, lots of different versions. So different terpene profiles, different flower structures, all of the things that we do in cannabis breeding anyways, but now we can apply it with this THCV trait or production capability.
Right. And so, well, thank you for clarifying how you're actually extracting it and getting that cannabinoid. But now, so let's talk about why it's unique, right? And why this is such a rare cannabinoid, and what current studies or testimonials or anecdotal data has shown, right? So, from what I've understand and read, I think I read something on Leafly where they talk about really dosing matters when it comes to THCV, because similarly to CBD, if you take it in low doses, it kind of diminishes the THC psychoactive effect, because THC, I guess, targets your CB1 receptor, right? So if you smoke a low amount of THCV, it's said to have kind of had that CBD effect where it kind of takes you down from your high. But at the same time, if you take a lot of THCV, you get that psychoactive effect like THC. So is that true? Is that anecdotal? Like, what have you seen in your experience doing the R&D and in development of these products?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. So again, given my background in clinical diagnostics and drug development, I try to be a little careful about the way we frame some of this up. I mean, because really realistically, without double blind clinical trials, it's hard to truly quantify and measure some of those specific effects. So, but what we do know anecdotally, and what folks that have tried it and and through the development process, is that for sure there are appetite suppression and stimulant qualities about from this plant, right? And when it gets smoked, and again, this is what's kind of exciting about this, is it is a high total cannabinoid producer. So it's got 9, 10, this new line that's being launched in California, there's actually 20% total cannabinoids. So there's THC, THCV present. There's also 2% terpenes present. So, what people are reporting is that it's still psychoactive, but right, it just has a much more uplifting, energetic, kind of high caffeinated type feel to it, and also appetite suppression qualities, right? So, more of and again, that's hence the name Day Slayer. I think where the group came up with that name was, it's a very high functioning daytime, type of smoke.
Right. And that really comes down to is that entourage effect, right? When you mentioned there's 20 different cannabinoids, including the secondary compounds like terpenes and flavonoids and all that. I mean, that's that full effect that you're getting as opposed to an isolate, right, where you're kind of missing out on the other
Yeah.
benefits of the cannabinoids.
Yeah. And again, I think there's, there's more and more data, there's more and more clinical data, there's more and more preclinical data. So there's a lot of data getting generated in the research community, and more as legalization spreads around the world. So the data is getting built to make those types of conclusions around the entourage effect and different receptors and different cannabinoids. I think the limited data that's out there around THCV shows that it does compete potentially with THC for certain receptors, and that's where pure THCV alone may not necessarily be psychoactive, and it could even displace THC as part of its effect. So again, I think there's still a lot of science to sort out there, but again, everybody that we've talked to and their experience around THCV is all very positive. And it counteracts it basically counteracts some of the negative attributes that you hear consumers talk about when they talk about cannabis, at least folks that may not be your typical cannabis consumer, but folks that say, yeah, cannabis makes me tired or sleepy, and it gives me the munchies, and when I feel groggy and cloudy, and we hear the opposite of those types of things from folks that are trying out these THCV genetics, and and it's more oh, it's energizing, it's uplifting, it's a clear-headed experience, it's also I'm not hungry, interestingly. So those are the types of comments that we're hearing anecdotally around it. And again, we've talked to folks across the market and different demographics, and we hear the same thing, right, from the handful of THCV products that I think have been out on the market.
Right. Yeah. I mean, no, it's a good point to raise. And again, we're not saying conclusive things. This is all anecdotal data. It's kind of things that you're hearing from customers and things that, on your side that you've heard and things that I've heard and read. Right. So it's just fascinates me though, that aspect of you said it's an appetite suppressant, which is crazy because, some strains of cannabis that are high in THC give you that munchy effect, right? So this is complete opposite of that.
Yep.
So that's interesting. And then I also heard, again, anecdotal, but it's a neuroprotective agent where it can help with Alzheimer's. And so I didn't understand that in terms of are they saying for memory or just kind of adjusting and coping with Alzheimer's as a disease?
Again, I think until we've got the real, clinical data to support it, I think it's hard to make a real conclusion around it. I think what we do know about cannabinoids in general, and then certain cannabinoids, they obviously have interaction with, your, with neurologic conditions, if you will, right? Mental health, even potentially things like, Alzheimer's, so there's a number of I think, possibilities there. And I think, it's a really exciting area of research. And I think we're going to see very interesting active pharmaceutical ingredients, that kind of go down that path that come from the plant, whether it's THCV or other similar cannabinoids. Yeah, so I think we're really just scratching the tip of the iceberg, right? I mean, until the Charlotte's Web story broke, around CBD and its impact on on certain forms of epilepsy, and then Epidiolex got approved, right? I don't think anybody knew, what impact CBD could have, right, on a very challenging and upsetting, childhood condition that occurs with a lot of kids, right? And so, anyways, I think THCV and other cannabinoids that we're just even beginning to learn about. I mean, again, it's actually, I think you said 20, it's 120, unique cannabinoids, right? And we're just scratching the tip of the iceberg in terms of being able to characterize some of those and understand how they impact people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, no, thanks for sharing, again, the anecdotal evidence that we're hearing in terms of THCV's therapeutic properties. Let's move on and talk about high strains that contain THCV in them. what are those, and what particular strains are Front Range Biosciences focused on?
Yeah, so again, I think it's been a pretty rare mutation and rare trait that's been observed, and that's why this is pretty exciting, because I think it really changes the consumer product landscape potentially around cannabis, opening the door for whole new experiences and and different types of products. There's a handful of land races that this mutation has been traditionally observed in. We work with a lot of different land races and and genetics from all over the world when we breed. I think the most well-known one that it's been observed in, I think, is Durbin Poison. I think is one that people frequently cite and where it was observed. But again, it's typically at fairly low levels, that you see in these genetics. And that's because this mutation, I don't know that we know exactly why, without getting into a lot of detail here, but I think generally what we've seen is that these plants are lower yielding in terms of total THCV, and then you start to breed for a plant that produces higher amounts of THCV, and you end up with a scraggly, poor performing, not very vigorous, plant. And so your yields are lower, and I think that makes it challenging to introduce in the supply chain effectively.
Mm-hmm. So what is in store for Front Range Biosciences next? I mean, I don't want to, obviously y'all just rolled out this new product line with THCV, but is it always y'all's mission to kind of stay ahead of the curve and find out ways to extract these, really rare cannabinoids like THCV moving forward? Is that something that y'all are focused on, or?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we're really a technology platform is really the way we view it, and the way our partners and customers and the way we work with them. We spent the last 4.5 years building a pretty incredible breeding platform, leveraging lots of different technologies and germplasm from all over the world. Our team, led by Dr. Reggie Godino, they've been breeding and working on cannabis genomics for quite a long time, and we're able to now leverage that, as well as things like our tissue culture and clean stock program and other things that we've developed. We're leveraging that to partner with different cannabis companies and even brands in the space, and that's really what the future holds for us. We're certainly doing the same thing on the hemp side. We've got farmers and partners and customers on the hemp side as well, where we leverage our genetics platform to develop new hemp varieties, whether it's hemp varieties that perform better in the Southeast or the Midwest, compared to the traditional cannabis genetics that come from the Pacific Northwest, right? Those are all things that we're solving on the hemp side. So and throughout all of that, we're unlocking the potential of this plant for new products, right? And THCV is one example, but CBDV, for example, and a propylcannabinoid on the CBD, that's CBD basically, in hemp, right? Those are the types of things that I think we're able to make available to the market now through our breeding. So we've got partners throughout California. We're going to be launching a program here in Colorado, and then we're also opening up the platform to partner with companies and growers in other states. I think the technology we've developed, it allows us to speed up the product development cycle through genetics, right? Whether it's different cannabinoid and terpene combinations and ratios, or even just improving the overall yield of of a production facility with improved genetics, right? Those are some of the things that that are on the horizon for us, and things that we're working with our partners on.
It's very exciting. And you mentioned, I think Day Slayer. Is that what that?
Yeah.
That
so
was?
that's the genetic that's been launched in California through some partners out there. So I think we'll start to see that showing up in over the course of 2021 out there, and there'll probably be some other genetics that get launched and branded as well.
That's exciting. Awesome. Well, we look forward to reading more about, y'all's progress and the different states that you're launching into, what is your outlook for 2021 and beyond? Obviously, we have a new administration, the House and the Senate that we went blue, and Chuck Schumer's talking about legal cannabis and even reform. So what do you think comes first, and how does the market play out?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I wish I had a crystal ball where I could just just kind of tell it like it is. But so I think that it's really exciting time for the cannabis industry. I think the election cycle really showed where the voting lies. Everybody's supportive. We saw multiple states legalize. We saw we've got members of Congress that are fully supportive. So I think it's a really exciting time. I think we're going to continue to see regulations that are more friendly or I should say, I think we're going to see decriminalization is a way to put it. Maybe there's going to be more regulation probably in some ways, which sometimes can be challenging. But that's been true of any industry, right? Regulation always takes time to catch up with the actual industry and the market and where it is. Right. So I think we're going to continue to see improvements on that front. I hope to see banking legislation, comprehensive reform, basically, at the legislative level. I think one thing that still is needs to be addressed head on is the social justice side and prohibition and all the things that have all the damage that that prohibition in our criminal justice system has put on or created in people's lives and across different demographics is something that needs to be addressed. And I think there are groups that are really starting to do that and put it front and center. And I think that's just as important as as the economics and decriminalization and and opening up a regulatory framework that will allow this market to continue to grow. And so I think we'll hopefully see more and more of that as well. So that some of these people that may have been incarcerated or other things that they can potentially get back to their lives. And so I think that's really important. I also think we're going to see, and especially with technology developments, like some of the things we're doing, I think we're going to see the consumer side of this whole market really expand, right? We've got new demographics that I think are going to be looking at cannabis as another, consumer product, just like alcohol or tobacco or dietary supplements or, any of the other, categories, specialty foods. And I think cannabis represents one of the most exciting, if not the most exciting new consumer category out there. So I think we're going to see, we're seeing all kinds of new technologies for different products and edibles and microdoses and, dietary supplements. I just, it's a pretty exciting time from a consumer product perspective as well. So I think those are some of the things that we'll see a lot more of over the next few years.
That is such a great point. The hyper focus on the consumer product side and how that's going to develop and evolve, right? Like once we kind of hit that full legalization, whenever that may be. But that brings up a good point in that, like the big dogs that are already kind of operating and have a solid footing in terms of market share, that's going to be kind of one of their big challenges is going to be to, I would say, cater their product formulations or technology to that specific demographic because it's so vast, right? I mean, anybody over the age of 21 could be a consumer and they could consume it in so many different ways, right?
Yep. I couldn't agree more. And I think that's one of our goals with the genetics platform, is to really be able to, not only accelerate the product development timeline, but really open the door in terms of, the different possibilities and the product opportunities. This plant, again, it's a pretty remarkable, little ingredient factory, right? It produces, all kinds of cannabinoids and terpenes and flavonoids. There's a lot of really interesting compounds here that I think can be, beneficial as, nutritional supplements, food ingredients, all the way to recreational products, cosmetic nutraceuticals, and then even pharmaceuticals. So, when you really start to look at the plant that way, it's pretty exciting. And our goal is really to unlock all of that potential through breeding, right? At the end of the day, if you identify some trace compounds, but it takes brute force to extract a meaningful amount from it, right? Something that's like a trace, cannabinoid or terpene or something, the economics don't work out very well, right? So if we can push those numbers up so that these plants can produce, meaningful amounts of some of these really interesting ingredients, it really opens the door for, these to become, consumer products.
Right. I've heard the cannabis plant called a lot of things. An ingredient factory is the first I've heard of that, but I love it. I got to tell you, I might use it, but I'll definitely give you credit. Don't worry.
It's just one of those things I say sometimes, but yes,
it's so true though.
Well, I'm a chemist. I'm a chemist, and that's my formal training. It really, when I look at this plant, it is, biologically and from a phytochemistry perspective, it produces just some really incredible compounds. And it also turns out that the cannabinoids, right, they fit almost lock and key with our whole endocannabinoid receptor system that, we've barely even been able to study at this point. So from a medical perspective. So again, really exciting time to be alive and to be part of this industry. It's really exciting stuff.
Yeah. Well, to that point, Dr. John, let me ask you this, because I brought this up on my last episode, and the importance of education, right? And what I said is that you have two major bodies. You have the policymaker side at the state, local, and federal level, and then you have the healthcare system, right? And both bodies, due to the federal regulation, right, and the prohibition, we don't know much about this, and we're just starting to kind of relearn what we've probably known in the past, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, tell me about like how important education is, and that sense of collaboration with the industry, working with those decision makers who ultimately invoke, policies and make decisions. Like, how important is that, and what's the best way to accomplish that?
Whew, that's a tough question. I think first, it's easy to say it's very important. I think, education at multiple levels, right? The consumer level, the policy level, there's just multiple levels of education is really, really important. Certainly from a health and safety and, consumer protection standpoint level, education obviously is really important there. So generating, more and more data and being able to get that data out to the public in a digestible format, right? I think that's really, really important for the industry as a whole. And then there's scientific data about growing the plant. There's medical data. There's, again, consumer products. So there's so many different layers to that education that I think you have to consider. In terms of how to accomplish it as an industry, I think for sure is, it's super important that, again, there has to be collaboration between the regulatory bodies and the industry, right? And this has been going on for a long time. I mean, it's why we have lobbyists. It's, we can all argue about whether or not our system is broken, and that's a whole separate conversation. Right. The reality is the way, it's worked for quite a long time is there has to be some level of back and forth, and the industry leaders that are able to collaborate with policymakers, I think that's a good path forward. Again, I don't think that, you can just roll over and, and say, oh, we're going to, favor one side or the other, right? Like, we got to make it 100% favorable towards, the industry, or 100% against the industry. And I think that's dangerous territory. So again, I think it really is important, that the industry, players work together with, with the governing bodies, the USDA, the FDA, hopefully there's not a lot of discussion left to be had with the DEA, as maybe we see some level of decriminalization around this, right? I think the drug war has caused a lot of problems. But
yeah, it's like go away, DEA. We've seen enough of you.
Well, I think we got to be thoughtful. I mean, a lot of these folks, had to, there was, they didn't create the system, right?
Right.
They were hired into it. So
sure.
So, but yeah, I think, hopefully we remove, that part of the discussion, and this really becomes more about consumer safety and about, efficacy, from a medical perspective, and supply chain stability, all of the different things that we think about when we look at other industries, right? Whether it's different, food products or dietary ingredients or even drugs. So, I think there's a big opportunity for the industry to again, we've got to rewrite the book in some ways, right? I mean, it's, we're kind of getting rid of some of the old laws and policies and trying to create new. And, the only way that's going to happen is with some level of collaboration.
Yeah. Do you think we're living through the same alcohol prohibition times where hemp and cannabis is going to save the economy?
It's really an interesting concept. I think, obviously I wasn't alive during those times. Reading the history books, again, the world has changed so much. The technology, the market, the population, there's so many differences now. I do think it is a fundamental piece of growing our economy. I think we saw that over the last year, right? While multiple industries struggled, I think we saw the regulated cannabis space continue to grow. And, some companies, even turn around after a challenging, prior couple of years, especially when you look at the end of 2019 and kind of what happened in the Canadian markets. Cannabis in the U.S. came back and was quite resilient. It was, it was an essential, essential function in a lot of states. Essential ag status or essential, work status for different states. When you look at how many jobs have been created by cannabis, I mean, I don't know what the latest stats are, but it's staggering. There's it's a very large number. It's more than some other industries in the U.S. now.
Yeah,
have a number.
I'm pulling it up right now because I actually just tweeted it earlier. So 77,000 jobs over the past year, a 32% increase, which makes the sector the fastest in job creation compared to any other American industry, according to Leafly.
There you go. So, that says it all right there. So, and we look at how many states have legalized how big the market is compared to, how big it could be. We're really still just in the early days. So, I think it has tremendous potential for, creating more jobs, just like other industries like alcohol is obviously the most closely related or similar, right?
Right.
The way it rolled out as a regulated industry, over the last 100 years and, and how that, all the jobs that creates. And I mean, I think we're going to see a very similar trajectory for cannabis.
And the last thing we'll kind of end with here, and this is the mind-blowing thing. And I talked about this with Jeff Apodaca before. And that is, we're just talking about the cannabinoid extraction side, right? Once we talk about industrial hemp for material goods, that's a whole other discussion in itself, right? I mean, in terms of all the applications potentially for hemp, once of course infrastructure is there, but biofuels, I mean, clothing, plastics, like houses, I mean, the list goes on and on. It's a really incredible plant. So when you say ingredient factory, you're absolutely right, both on the consumable side and on the material goods side,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is such an exciting area. We have a whole hemp program as well. And, and we're looking at all of these different traits in industrial hemp, plant-based protein. I think it has a huge opportunity there to be, it's a balanced protein source. It's got fatty acids and dietary fiber. It's got, lots of nutritional components from a plant-based protein side. The industrial material side is a whole nother area. Again, you mentioned, textiles, but there's, building materials. This plant, as an ag company and a plant breeding company, we look at it and say, all right, well, how does this plant compare to something like cotton or lumber, right? Which are the ways that you currently get, building materials and textiles. And, the reality is that I think we can actually probably grow this plant with, the right infrastructure in place and the processing, right, to take it off the field and put it in the supply chain. I think it's going to be a much more environmentally sustainable approach. I think that from an input perspective and a farming perspective, I think we'll be able to, we have hemp varieties that are naturally pest resistant, right? So, removes the need for certain pesticides. We have varieties that survive in really extreme climate conditions, right? Super hot and dry, low water. Also, different soil types, right? We've got plants that can survive, even levels of cold, right, and freeze. So, I mean, it is pretty remarkable when you look at all of that and you say, okay, you've got a finicky, challenging, high input cost crop like cotton and trees for lumber and building materials. And now if you could replace something like that, or begin to replace something like that with a fast cycle crop that can be grown more effectively, again, it's kind of mind-boggling when you think about it. I think it'll take us 5 to 10 years at least to get there.
Sure.
Again, it's not magic. This doesn't just happen. You start growing hemp and all of a sudden it solves all these problems.
Right.
But I think as the industry grows and as these different as the infrastructure gets put in place, I think we'll see hemp crop up in a lot of different places.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And I know what our third podcast will be when you come on again. It'll be to talk about industrial hemp for material goods and what Front Range Biosciences is doing in that sector.
Yep, absolutely. We're excited to see the developments on the hemp side as well.
Awesome. Well, hey, Dr. John, thank you so much today for coming on and sharing information about your new cannabinoid variety product line, including or featuring THCV. You've educated us on the science of it and the anecdotal evidence that it's shown to do from a therapeutic standpoint, and really enjoyed it. Where can people find y'all's website and social media if they want to learn more?
Yeah, frontrangebio.com, and we're on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, all of those normal social channels. So come check us out. We'd love to chat.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Dr. John. I look forward to having you on again, and thank you all for listening.
All right, thanks.
Bye.